The naval base was quiet in the early morning, but the calm was only on the surface. Inside, a group of the nation's top SEALs and high-ranking officers were gathering in one of the most secure briefing rooms the Navy had. The walls were lined with screens displaying maps, intelligence feeds, and satellite images. The air smelled faintly of polished metal and coffee, but there was an unmistakable tension buzzing through the room. Every person present had been part of high-stakes operations before, yet this meeting carried a weight unlike any ordinary briefing. In the middle of this atmosphere walked a young woman, her steps confident but measured. She wasn't there to make an impression. She had long learned that actions spoke louder than appearances, but the room couldn't help but notice her. She was relatively unknown to most of the SEALs and admirals present, even though she had already commanded operations that had gone unseen by the public eye. Her uniform was flawless, her medals discreet but telling, a quiet testament to experience earned in silence. Some in the room gave her polite nods, while others barely masked curiosity or skepticism. The young officer paused at the front of the room, scanning the faces in the room. She had been here before in situations where every detail mattered, where a single misstep could cost lives. Today was no different. Her eyes were steady, her posture disciplined, but her mind was calculating, running through every piece of intel she had, every potential question that could come her way. She knew many in the room would underestimate her. They might glance at her age, her appearance, her quiet demeanor, and assume she wasn't someone who commanded respect at the highest levels. But she had learned long ago that underestimation could be an advantage. Those who doubted her often found themselves surprised, and sometimes completely unprepared, for the reality of her authority. The briefing itself was about a highly sensitive operation, one involving multiple agencies, classified intelligence, and a mission that could not fail. The SEALs in the room were used to high-pressure situations, used to intense scrutiny and rapid decision-making. But this mission was different, and the young officer was about to step into the center of it. She had been called in not because of her rank alone, but because she had experience, strategy, and insight that few others could bring to a situation of this magnitude. As she began to take her place at the front, she noticed the subtle reactions of the seasoned SEALs around her. Some shifted in their seats, exchanging quiet looks. A few raised eyebrows. There were murmurs almost imperceptible, as if they were trying to guess what level of experience this officer might actually have. She had learned to ignore such whispers. They carried no real weight compared to the decisions she needed to make in the room. Still, it was interesting to watch, almost like observing how other players react in a chess game before the first move is made. Every glance, every subtle gesture, gave her small pieces of information about how the room might respond when she revealed her role and authority. The SEAL Admiral, known for his humor as much as his combat record, leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing on his lips. He liked to test newcomers, to make little jests and see how they reacted under pressure. He had seen countless officers come through these briefings, many full of confidence, some with even greater skill than they let on. But today he was curious. The young officer standing before the room seemed calm, almost detached. Yet there was an undeniable air of competence around her. She wasn't announcing herself loudly, but the quiet command she carried was unmistakable. The officer set down her briefing folder on the table and glanced at the screens. Satellite images, mission maps, and intelligence reports were projected in front of her. She didn't need to introduce herself formally. Her presence, combined with the way she handled the materials, spoke volumes. She began reviewing key points with precision, her voice clear and steady. Each piece of information she presented was accurate, concise, and well-organized, showing she had not only prepared thoroughly but also understood the bigger picture, far beyond what most in the room expected from someone they had barely heard of. Even as she spoke, she was calculating the room's perception. Some were still skeptical, judging her by appearance and age, assuming experience could not come in such a quiet package. Others were watching carefully, trying to detect any hint of weakness. But what they couldn't see, what they would only realize soon enough, was that this young officer had led operations that were so secretive. Her achievements were known only to a handful of people at the very top of the military. In other words, she was already operating at a level far beyond what anyone in that room imagined. By the time the briefing officially began, the room had settled into a focused hush. Everyone could sense that, despite initial impressions, the young officer was not here by accident. She had been called for her skill, her judgment, and her unique ability to see missions in a way others could not. For now, the air of tension and curiosity hung quietly, waiting for the moment when the SEAL Admiral's Jest would meet the reality of the officer's rank. A moment that would soon change the dynamics of the room entirely. The young officer had barely finished arranging her briefing materials when the SEAL Admiral, known for his sharp wit and playful jabs, decided to break the tense atmosphere. He leaned forward slightly in his chair, a faint smirk forming on his face. "So," he said, his voice carrying just enough humor to fill the room without being disrespectful. "What rank do you hold, Lieutenant, Commander, or something more modest?" The comment was clearly meant as a jest, a playful test of her reaction. In rooms like this, seasoned officers often used humor as a way to gauge confidence. The Admiral's words were designed to see if the young officer would flinch, stumble, or let nerves show. Many who had come before her might have chuckled nervously or tried to mask their pride. But this was no ordinary officer. She had faced pressure far greater than this, and her experience had taught her that composure was as much a weapon as any tactical skill. For a brief moment, the room reacted. A few of the SEALs leaned back in their chairs, anticipating a quick and modest response. Some smiled politely, thinking this would be a routine exchange, just another young officer playing her part. Others, however, watched more intently, their curiosity piqued by the air of quiet confidence surrounding her. She didn't rush her answer. She looked directly at the Admiral, her gaze steady, unwavering, as if measuring him the way he had measured her. Then she spoke, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the quiet murmur of the room. "Fleet Commander." The words seemed to hang in the air, almost as if time itself had paused. The room went silent instantly. The smirk on the SEAL Admiral's face vanished as he processed what he had just heard. His eyes widened slightly, a mixture of disbelief and sudden realization flashing across his expression. No one in the room had expected such a rank. The term Fleet Commander carried weight, authority, and responsibility that few could imagine, and certainly, no one had anticipated it from someone so young and understated. The other SEALs and officers shifted in their seats, some exchanging stunned glances, others simply staring in astonishment. Whispers that had circulated moments before, quiet doubts about her age or experience, vanished as quickly as they had formed. This was no longer about appearances or assumptions. This was a demonstration of true authority. The young officer had revealed, with a single phrase, that she was not someone to be underestimated. The SEAL Admiral, momentarily speechless, struggled to regain his composure. Humor, which he had wielded so naturally, suddenly seemed unnecessary in the face of such revelation. The room, previously filled with a low hum of casual chatter and anticipation, now held a profound silence. Every person present felt the shift. It was subtle yet undeniable. The dynamic of the room had changed. The officer's calm, confident response had commanded attention, respect, and a measure of awe that no joke could provoke. The young officer, fully aware of the impact of her words, did not gloat or seek approval. She had learned that true authority needed no performance. It required only clarity, precision, and the quiet assurance that comes from experience. She began reviewing her materials with the same steady rhythm as before, but now every word she spoke carried additional weight. The room listened differently, hanging on each statement, recognizing that the person in front of them was not just another officer. It was someone who had already proven herself in ways few could comprehend. Even the SEALs, who had faced countless high-stakes situations, found themselves momentarily caught off guard. They had trained to expect the unexpected, yet the revelation of her rank brought a new level of seriousness to the room. It was a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, that competence and leadership were not always visible on the surface. They began to reassess their assumptions, realizing that this young officer possessed a depth of experience and authority that demanded respect. As the initial shock settled, the Admiral finally spoke, his tone now more measured. "I didn't expect that," he admitted, a hint of admiration creeping into his voice. The room remained attentive, the prior jest now irrelevant. What mattered was the reality she had revealed. In that moment, the young officer had done more than answer a question. She had established her presence, her authority, and her credibility. She had set the stage for what was about to unfold, proving that rank, experience, and skill could not be judged by appearances or assumptions. The tension in the room began to shift from skepticism to curiosity. The SEALs and other officers leaned forward, eager to understand not just the rank she held, but the responsibilities and experiences that came with it. They wanted to know what missions she had led, what strategies she had devised, and how she had achieved such authority at a relatively young age. Every person in the room now recognized that they were in the presence of someone exceptional, someone whose expertise and leadership would be critical to the success of the operations they were about to discuss. Her simple, calm answer had done more than silence a joke. It had commanded respect, reshaped perceptions, and subtly reminded everyone present that in the world of elite military operations, competence and authority were earned through action, not assumptions. In that room on that morning, the young officer had already begun to leave a lasting impression, one that would set the tone for every interaction that followed. The moment she said her rank, the room went silent, as if someone had pressed pause on everything. The SEAL Admiral, who had just moments before been joking, now stared at her with a mixture of astonishment and newfound respect. His humor, usually quick and sharp, had no place here. He realized immediately that this was not a young officer to be casually underestimated or tested with a light-hearted question. She held the kind of authority that demanded attention. The quiet in the room was almost tangible, broken only by the subtle shifting of chairs and the occasional clearing of a throat as people tried to process what they had just heard. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The SEALs, who were trained to act fast under pressure, seemed momentarily frozen, caught off guard by the revelation. They had faced dangerous missions, enemy ambushes, and life-or-death operations, yet nothing in their experience had prepared them for the quiet confidence and sheer authority of someone so young revealing herself in this manner. It was a moment that made even the most seasoned veterans pause and reconsider everything they thought they knew about hierarchy, competence, and leadership. The SEAL Admiral, a man who had spent decades commanding elite forces, felt a rare moment of humility. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her. He realized that his jest had been a mistake, not in tone but in assumption. He had assumed she would give a modest answer, something that fit the expectations of age and appearance. Instead, she had shattered those assumptions with a single phrase. For the first time in many years, he was silent, not out of surprise alone, but because he understood the magnitude of the authority she carried. Around the room, other officers and SEALs reacted in their own ways. Some were visibly impressed, their expressions softening into a mix of respect and curiosity. They leaned forward slightly, trying to read her face, looking for signs of exaggeration or pride, but found none. She was composed, professional, and utterly confident. Others, who had initially doubted her, now sat back in their chairs, their minds racing to adjust to this new reality. It was a subtle but powerful lesson. Appearances can be deceiving, and true capability is often hidden beneath layers of quiet confidence and hard-earned experience. The young officer did not rush to fill the silence with explanation or justification. She knew that her rank alone would speak volumes to those who understood the military hierarchy and the responsibilities attached to it. The officers in the room were intelligent and experienced. They didn't need her to explain herself immediately. Her calm demeanor only heightened the impact of her words. In that quiet, her authority became palpable, almost like a weight in the room that demanded recognition. The SEAL Admiral finally spoke, but his words were careful, measured, as if he were testing himself to respond appropriately. "I didn't expect that," he admitted quietly, his usual humor absent. The admission was not only an acknowledgement of her rank but also a recognition of her expertise, experience, and the seriousness she brought to the room. It was clear to everyone that this was no ordinary officer, and any assumptions based on her age or appearance were now irrelevant. As the initial shock began to settle, the young officer continued her briefing, moving through her materials with the same calm precision she had always practiced. She discussed mission objectives, intelligence assessments, and tactical plans, each statement carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had been in command before. Her voice was steady, her explanations clear, and her understanding of the mission comprehensive. Even in the face of the room's initial astonishment, she maintained her composure, reinforcing the respect she had already earned simply by being herself. The room's atmosphere shifted gradually from disbelief to focused attention. The SEALs and other officers, now fully aware of her authority, began to listen not just to her words but to the way she presented them, the precision, the clarity, and the depth of understanding. They realized that her experience was real and extensive. She had likely handled complex operations, made critical decisions under pressure, and led teams in situations far more dangerous than anything they were currently discussing. Each detail she shared added credibility to her rank and authority, leaving no doubt about her capabilities. Even those who had initially been skeptical began to respect her instinctively. Leadership, they saw, was not about loudness or theatrics. It was about control, insight, and the ability to make others follow with trust rather than fear. She commanded that trust effortlessly. The SEAL Admiral, watching all of this unfold, felt a sense of admiration mingled with humility. He had learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate someone based on appearances alone. By the time the briefing began in earnest, the room had transformed. What had started as a casual gathering had become a space where every person present was acutely aware of the young officer's authority and the depth of her experience. The silence that had followed her revelation was no longer awkward. It was a recognition of respect. The SEAL Admiral's jest, intended as a light moment, had inadvertently set the stage for a powerful demonstration of leadership and credibility. This was a moment that would be remembered by everyone in the room. In a single instant, she had turned doubt into admiration, surprise into respect, and casual curiosity into focused attention. The lesson was clear. True authority does not need to announce itself loudly. It is recognized naturally, quietly, and inevitably by those who understand its value. The young officer had already begun to shape the room, subtly but decisively, showing that leadership, skill, and experience were far more important than age or outward appearances. After the initial shock of hearing her rank, the room began to settle into a tense but attentive focus. The young officer, fully aware of the impact her words had made, began to speak with calm authority. She did not pause to bask in the astonishment around her. Instead, she shifted smoothly into her role as the person leading the briefing. Every movement, every gesture, conveyed confidence and control. She placed her briefing folder on the table, turned to the screens behind her, and began explaining the operation in a way that immediately drew everyone's attention. Her voice was steady and precise, carrying an authority that made even the most experienced SEALs sit up straighter. She outlined the objectives of the mission, breaking down complex intelligence into clear, understandable segments. As she spoke, the room realized that she knew details that only someone at the highest levels of command could know. Satellite imagery, covert intel reports, and classified tactical assessments were all part of her presentation, and she presented them effortlessly, as if it were second nature. Each fact she shared seemed to reinforce the truth of her rank. Fleet Commander. The SEAL Admiral watched closely, his mind racing. He had always trusted his instincts, but even he was forced to reconsider what he thought he knew. This officer was not simply holding a high rank as a formality. She was commanding attention and respect through knowledge, strategy, and insight. Her understanding of the mission was precise, almost surgical. She anticipated questions before they were asked, addressing possible concerns with data and logic that left little room for doubt. The room, once skeptical, was now fully engaged. Even the SEALs, who had faced countless missions in life-or-death situations, were impressed. They began to see the depth of her experience. She described the coordination required between multiple teams, the timing of actions down to the second, and the potential risks involved, each one backed by intelligence that few could access. Her explanations were not boastful. They were factual, strategic, and delivered with a quiet confidence that made her credibility unquestionable. Every word added weight to her authority and proved that her rank was not just a title, it was earned through experience and skill. As she went through the mission details, it became clear that she had overseen operations that many in the room had only heard of in passing or had never encountered at all. The specifics she shared revealed an intricate understanding of logistics, strategy, and human behavior in combat situations. She discussed contingencies, highlighting how her teams would respond to unexpected challenges, and her plans were so thorough that even the most experienced officers recognized the value of her insight. The SEAL Admiral realized that this young officer had been commanding classified operations, unseen and unrecognized publicly, for years. Her calm authority created a shift in the room's dynamics. Where there had been curiosity and skepticism, now there was respect. Every officer present, regardless of prior assumptions, could see that she was fully in command. The SEALs and admirals began to listen differently. Not just to her words, but to the way she spoke, the way she organized information, and the decisiveness behind every point she made. It became clear that her leadership style was both methodical and effective, capable of inspiring confidence and action from even the most seasoned operatives. The young officer continued to guide the briefing, seamlessly moving between different aspects of the mission. She described how intelligence had been gathered, how risks were calculated, and how teams would execute their objectives. Her explanations were precise but accessible, making sure everyone in the room could follow, while still demonstrating that she possessed knowledge far beyond what most officers her age would have. This clarity and competence silenced any lingering doubts, leaving the room in a state of attentive focus. Throughout the briefing, the SEAL Admiral remained quiet, absorbing every detail. His initial jest had been a casual, playful test, but now he realized it had underestimated the officer entirely. Her authority was undeniable, and her mastery of the mission details left him with no choice but to acknowledge her as a true leader. He could see that the respect she commanded was not superficial. It was built on years of experience, careful planning, and exceptional skill. Even the SEALs who had initially doubted her were now following her lead, taking notes and nodding as she outlined the critical steps of the operation. The young officer's performance in this part of the briefing revealed a larger truth. Leadership is not about age, appearance, or reputation alone. It is about the ability to understand complex situations, make decisions with clarity, and inspire confidence in others. She demonstrated that kind of leadership effortlessly. By the end of the session, the room had been transformed. What began as a skeptical, tense atmosphere had become a space where everyone present recognized her authority and expertise. She had established herself not just as a fleet commander in title, but as a leader whose experience, judgment, and strategic thinking demanded respect. The SEAL Admiral, now fully aware of the scope of her capability, felt a rare mix of admiration and humility. He had joked at the beginning, testing her lightly, but now he understood that this young officer was extraordinary. She had already earned the respect of everyone in the room, and the stage was set for her to lead the upcoming mission with authority, precision, and skill that would leave no doubts about her competence. In revealing the depth of her knowledge and experience, she had not only proved her rank but had also reshaped the perception of leadership in the room, quietly but powerfully. The young officer's briefing continued, and slowly but surely, the atmosphere in the room began to change. At first, a few of the SEALs exchanged skeptical glances, unable to reconcile her age and calm demeanor with the weight of the authority she now held. They had been trained to expect boldness, aggression, and outward confidence from leaders, especially in high-stakes situations. Many assumed that leadership would be loud, commanding, and unyielding. Yet here she was, calm, quiet, and poised, commanding attention simply through knowledge, clarity, and precision. The skepticism among some of the more experienced SEALs began to fade as she outlined the mission in even greater detail. She didn't speak in vague terms or generalities. Instead, she provided exact timings, clear roles for each unit, and contingency plans for every imaginable scenario. She anticipated challenges that could arise during the operation, from logistical issues to unexpected enemy moves, and she explained how her teams would respond without hesitation. Her foresight and planning were impeccable, revealing not only a brilliant mind but also someone who had learned from years of experience in the field. One by one, the doubters in the room started to nod along. They recognized the depth of her understanding and the practicality of her approach. Leadership, they realized, wasn't about being the loudest or having the most medals on display. It was about making the right decisions at the right time and inspiring confidence in those who followed. Her calm voice carried authority, and her clear explanations left no room for confusion or doubt. Even the most hardened SEALs, who had faced life-or-death situations countless times, were impressed by the precision and completeness of her planning. The SEAL Admiral watched silently, his mind racing to absorb what was happening. He had initially joked to test her, but he now understood that this officer's capabilities were far beyond what he had imagined. Her composure and strategic brilliance had captured the attention of everyone in the room. The Admiral realized that she had the rare ability to lead by example, demonstrating her authority not through theatrics but through expertise, clarity, and decisiveness. Her quiet confidence was more powerful than any shouted command. As she moved through the briefing, she shared examples from her past missions, carefully choosing which details to reveal without compromising classified information. Each story highlighted her ability to make critical decisions under pressure, coordinate complex operations, and achieve objectives with minimal risk. The room began to see the full picture. This young officer had not only held the rank of fleet commander, but had earned it through extraordinary skill and experience. Her calm authority was no accident. It was the product of years of demanding work, discipline, and leadership under the most challenging conditions. By now, the initial skepticism had transformed into genuine respect. The SEALs who had doubted her capability were now paying close attention, listening to every word and analyzing every plan she presented. They recognized that her authority was not superficial. It was real, earned through countless missions, careful planning, and a deep understanding of both strategy and human behavior. Even those who were naturally cynical began to see her as a leader they could follow without hesitation. The young officer also demonstrated another quality that set her apart: her ability to inspire confidence. She spoke not only with clarity but also with empathy, acknowledging the challenges her teams might face and showing that she valued their expertise and input. This subtle leadership skill made the SEALs and officers in the room feel included and respected, further solidifying her authority. They realized that she was not just giving orders. She was leading, guiding, and ensuring that everyone understood their role and the importance of their actions. The SEAL Admiral finally leaned forward, a clear sign of his growing respect. He understood that this officer's calm, deliberate approach was precisely what made her an effective leader. Unlike leaders who relied on intimidation or force, she commanded respect through knowledge, foresight, and the ability to communicate clearly under pressure. Her authority was quiet but undeniable, and it had transformed the room. By the time the briefing reached its midpoint, there was a noticeable shift in the energy of the room. What had started as skepticism had evolved into trust and admiration. The officers and SEALs were no longer questioning her capability. Instead, they were engaged, asking questions and taking notes, fully aware that she was someone whose leadership could mean the difference between success and failure. They began to see her not just as a fleet commander by title, but as a true leader whose judgment, experience, and strategic brilliance were invaluable assets. The young officer's performance in this part of the briefing left an indelible mark on everyone present. She had transformed the atmosphere from doubt and curiosity to focus, respect, and engagement. Her calm authority, combined with precise knowledge and thoughtful communication, had silenced skepticism and earned her the trust of even the most experienced SEALs. She demonstrated that leadership was not about appearances or theatrics. It was about competence, insight, and the ability to inspire confidence in others. By the end of this section of the briefing, the room was fully aligned with her vision. The SEAL Admiral, now completely attentive, realized that his initial jest had underestimated not only her rank but her extraordinary capability. The young officer had proven that she was not only capable of leading complex operations but of earning the respect and trust of those around her, simply through knowledge, clarity, and quiet confidence. Her presence had transformed the room, and it was clear that under her guidance, the mission would be executed with precision, strategy, and unmatched leadership. As the briefing moved forward, the young officer shifted the focus from past missions and general planning to the critical operation that lay ahead. This was the part of the briefing that truly tested the room's attention and understanding, and she was fully prepared. The SEALs, the Admiral, and all the officers leaned in slightly, sensing the gravity of what she was about to outline. Unlike earlier moments, which had introduced her authority and experience, this section would show her tactical genius and ability to lead under high-stakes conditions. She began by describing the mission with clarity and precision. Every objective, every possible outcome, and every risk was accounted for. She spoke in a calm, confident voice, outlining the steps her team would take to neutralize threats, protect civilians, and maintain operational security. Unlike many briefings that could become convoluted with unnecessary details, hers was structured, logical, and easy to follow. Each part of the plan connected to the next, showing not just tactical skill but also strategic thinking that went beyond immediate actions and considered long-term consequences. The SEALs listened carefully, some taking notes, others simply absorbing the information. They had been trained to recognize experience and skill, and it became increasingly clear that this officer possessed both in abundance. She described team movements with exacting detail, from insertion points to extraction routes, timing each step with precision. She explained how teams would adapt if the enemy reacted unpredictably, and how intelligence gathered in real time would inform every decision. The meticulous nature of her planning impressed everyone. It demonstrated a depth of foresight that could only come from years of hands-on leadership in high-risk operations. As she continued, she highlighted the importance of coordination between multiple units and agencies. This was not a mission that could succeed with a single group acting in isolation. Her explanation revealed a sophisticated understanding of collaboration, communication, and trust. She spoke of the roles of each team member, explaining how their actions would fit into the larger plan and why each move mattered. The officers in the room, especially those familiar with the complexity of multi-team operations, began to nod in approval. They could see immediately that this officer understood not just strategy, but the human and operational dynamics that could make or break the mission. The SEAL Admiral, who had initially jested about her rank, remained silent, observing and analyzing. Every detail she presented confirmed her authority and competence. Her understanding of the mission was comprehensive, down to minor contingencies that others might overlook. He realized that this officer's leadership was not theoretical. It was practical, informed by real-world experience in situations that demanded rapid decision-making, composure under pressure, and flawless execution. His respect for her had grown immensely since the first moment she revealed her rank. What impressed the room even more was the way she addressed potential challenges and risks. She didn't shy away from the difficulties of the mission. Instead, she confronted them head-on, outlining how her teams would overcome obstacles while minimizing casualties and avoiding unnecessary exposure. She discussed possible scenarios with confidence, showing that she had already thought through alternatives for every imaginable complication. Her ability to anticipate problems and present solutions reassured even the most skeptical officers. They began to see not just a fleet commander, but a leader capable of thinking several steps ahead in the most critical situations. The officer also emphasized the importance of timing and precision. She explained how split-second decisions could influence the success of the operation, and how each team member's role was crucial in maintaining coordination. The SEALs, who understood the stakes of such precise timing from experience, were visibly impressed. They recognized that she was not simply issuing commands from a distance. She had planned every movement, every response, and every communication in detail, ensuring the mission would run smoothly even under extreme pressure. Even the subtle aspects of her plan showcased her brilliance. She highlighted strategies to maintain operational secrecy, protect sensitive intelligence, and prevent exposure of the teams involved. Her focus on these details demonstrated that she had learned the hard lessons of covert operations, lessons that could only come from leading such missions herself. The room understood that she wasn't just an authority figure on paper. She had earned her rank by successfully navigating the same dangers they now faced. By the end of her presentation on the mission, the room's skepticism had completely disappeared. The officers and SEALs were no longer questioning her capability. They were fully engaged and ready to follow her lead. Even the SEAL Admiral, who had begun the briefing with a playful jest, now sat fully attentive, clearly impressed by her expertise and strategic acumen. He understood that her leadership would be essential to the mission's success, and he respected her ability to command attention and trust without raising his voice or asserting dominance aggressively. The young officer's performance in this part of the briefing solidified her position as the undeniable authority in the room. Through clarity, precision, foresight, and an understanding of both human and tactical dynamics, she had transformed initial curiosity and skepticism into full trust and admiration. The SEALs and officers now saw her not only as a fleet commander by title, but as a brilliant leader whose planning and insight could make the difference between mission success and failure. As the discussion moved toward questions and clarifications, everyone in the room understood that this officer had earned their respect. Her calm, methodical, and detailed approach had demonstrated not just knowledge but mastery. They realized that under her guidance, the mission would proceed with skill, coordination, and authority that few could match. In that moment, it became clear that her rank was not just a title. It was a reflection of her extraordinary ability to lead, plan, and execute at the highest level. After laying out the critical details of the mission, the young officer moved from briefing to action. The room had already been transformed from skepticism to respect, but now it was time to show that her authority extended beyond words and planning. She had to prove it through execution. A simulation exercise was organized, designed to mimic the high-stakes conditions of the upcoming operation. Every SEAL, officer, and support personnel present knew this was more than a practice run. It was a test of strategy, leadership, and decision-making under pressure. As the simulation began, she took her place at the head of the table, her posture calm yet commanding. Every team member instinctively recognized that she was in charge. There was no hesitation, no need for exaggerated displays of authority. Her presence alone was enough to make it clear. She gave instructions in a firm, precise tone, leaving no room for confusion. Every directive was logical, every order clear, and every contingency accounted for. The SEALs, who had faced countless unpredictable scenarios, listened intently, realizing that she could anticipate challenges that others might overlook. The simulation started with a complex scenario involving multiple teams moving in synchronization across different terrains. Communication had to be flawless, and timing had to be perfect. The young officer monitored every move, making adjustments on the fly while keeping the big picture in mind. She guided each team with precision, redirecting units as necessary, anticipating potential obstacles, and ensuring that everyone stayed aligned with the mission objectives. Her ability to stay calm while managing multiple moving parts was remarkable, and it quickly became evident that she had mastered the kind of leadership that only comes from extensive field experience. Even the SEAL Admiral, who had initially jested about her rank, was watching closely. He had seen countless officers and commanders in action, but rarely had he witnessed such composed authority combined with tactical brilliance. The young officer didn't shout or try to assert dominance aggressively. Instead, she inspired confidence through competence. Every adjustment she made, every instruction she issued, reinforced her authority and demonstrated why her rank as fleet commander was not just a title, but a reflection of her extraordinary capabilities. The SEALs responded quickly and efficiently to her commands. What had started as skepticism now transformed into seamless coordination. They trusted her judgment, executing complex maneuvers exactly as she had outlined. She had earned this trust not by demanding it, but by proving, through her expertise and foresight, that her decisions were the right ones. Even seasoned veterans were impressed by the clarity of her instructions and the speed with which she identified potential risks and solutions. Throughout the exercise, she maintained a balance between strict command and flexibility. When unexpected scenarios were introduced, simulated enemy movements, sudden communication breakdowns, and logistical complications. She adjusted plans instantly, without showing any sign of panic or uncertainty. Her ability to think several steps ahead allowed the teams to adapt seamlessly, demonstrating her strategic foresight. This was not mere improvisation. It was the result of careful planning, deep understanding of tactics, and the ability to lead under pressure. As the simulation progressed, it became evident that her leadership style was not about control for its own sake, but about enabling everyone to perform at their best. She encouraged input from experienced SEALs and officers, listened carefully, and integrated their suggestions into the plan where appropriate. This collaborative approach did not diminish her authority. Instead, it strengthened it. By showing respect for the expertise of others while maintaining ultimate command, she created an environment where everyone was fully committed to executing the mission successfully. The room watched as her instructions led to a flawless sequence of simulated operations. Each team moved with precision, each action was coordinated, and every objective was achieved within the parameters of the exercise. The SEAL Admiral, now fully attentive, couldn't hide his admiration. He realized that her calm authority, strategic thinking, and ability to manage both people and tasks under pressure were qualities that few officers could match. Her rank as fleet commander was clearly justified, and her actions had proven it beyond any doubt. Even the most skeptical SEALs, who had initially questioned her capability, were now fully aligned with her commands. They respected her judgment, trusted her decisions, and responded instantly to her guidance. The exercise had transformed from a test into a demonstration of her ability to lead complex operations, showing that her authority was not only recognized in words, but also validated through action. By the end of the simulation, it was clear to everyone present that this young officer had earned her position as fleet commander through skill, experience, and exceptional leadership. Her calm confidence, combined with her strategic brilliance, had inspired trust, respect, and admiration. The SEAL Admiral, humbled by her capabilities, acknowledged internally that his initial jest had underestimated her completely. The exercise had not only validated her authority but also set a precedent for how she would lead in real-life missions. The young officer's performance proved a critical lesson to everyone in the room. Leadership is not measured by age, appearance, or forceful assertion, but by the ability to plan, adapt, and inspire confidence in those you lead. She had demonstrated that true authority is recognized through competence, decisiveness, and the ability to bring out the best in a team, even under the most challenging circumstances. Her actions in the simulation made it abundantly clear that the upcoming mission would be executed with precision, skill, and unwavering leadership. By the time the briefing and simulation exercises concluded, the room had completely transformed. What had started as skepticism, curiosity, and casual humor had evolved into deep respect, admiration, and acknowledgement of true leadership. The young officer, through calm authority, strategic brilliance, and flawless execution, had proven herself to everyone present, not just in words, but in action. Her role as fleet commander was no longer a title on paper. It was a reality that every SEAL, officer, and even the SEAL Admiral now recognized fully. The SEAL Admiral, who had first asked her rank as a jest, finally spoke, his voice measured but tinged with genuine admiration. "I underestimated you," he admitted quietly, almost to himself. There was no embarrassment in his tone, only recognition of the rare skill and poise displayed by the officer. His jest had been intended to test her reaction, but it had inadvertently revealed the extraordinary depth of her experience and the quiet authority she carried. In that room, his silence had shifted from astonishment to respect, a respect that carried more weight than any words could express. The other officers and SEALs now looked at her not merely as a colleague or superior by rank, but as a leader whose judgment could be trusted implicitly. They reflected on the briefings, the detailed explanations, the contingency plans, and the flawless execution during the simulation. Each moment had been carefully calculated, yet delivered with a calm confidence that inspired those around her. They realized that her leadership was not about demanding obedience, but about earning trust through skill, clarity, and insight. What stood out the most was the way she had commanded authority without ever raising her voice or forcing compliance. She led with intelligence, foresight, and a deep understanding of both human and operational dynamics. Every SEAL, every officer, and even support personnel recognized that her commands were grounded in expertise. Her plans were carefully thought out, and her confidence was genuine. She had shown them that true leadership comes from mastery, not bravado. In the quiet moments following the simulation, the room buzzed with a mixture of awe and reflection. Conversations that had begun with doubt now focused on questions about her experience, strategies, and approach. People wanted to understand not just her rank, but the knowledge, discipline, and courage that had allowed her to earn it. She answered questions calmly, providing clarity without arrogance, demonstrating once again why respect had shifted so naturally in her favor. The officers and SEALs found themselves inspired, not just by the mission or the plans, but by the way she carried herself, made decisions, and led by example. The young officer herself remained composed, fully aware of the impact she had made but never allowing it to affect her professionalism. She knew that leadership was not about personal recognition, but about ensuring the mission's success and the safety and effectiveness of the team. She reflected briefly on the journey that had brought her here. Years of covert operations, high-stakes missions, countless challenges, and hard-earned lessons in judgment, discipline, and resilience. All of that experience had culminated in this moment, where she had quietly earned the respect of some of the most elite operators in the world. The SEAL Admiral, in particular, felt a deep sense of respect and humility. He had spent decades in command, and yet here was a young officer who had surpassed expectations not through assertiveness alone, but through calm competence and strategic brilliance. He realized that his initial jest had been a poor measure of her capability, one that was corrected immediately by her calm revelation of rank and the demonstration of her skills. In that moment, he understood that true leadership often comes in unexpected packages, and that underestimating someone based on age, appearance, or demeanor can be a critical error. The other SEALs nodded in agreement as they processed what they had witnessed. They reflected on how the young officer had handled challenges, coordinated multiple teams, anticipated risks, and executed plans flawlessly in the simulation. Her calm authority had created a sense of confidence and cohesion within the room. Even those who were initially doubtful had been won over, understanding that her decisions could be trusted implicitly. They had seen a rare combination of tactical brilliance, emotional intelligence, and leadership presence, a combination that made her an extraordinary fleet commander. As the session concluded, the young officer addressed the room one final time. She reminded everyone that the success of the upcoming mission would depend not on titles or egos, but on teamwork, preparation, and clear communication. Her words were measured, precise, and inspiring. They reinforced the lesson she had already demonstrated throughout the briefing. Leadership is not about being the loudest voice in the room, but about earning trust, inspiring confidence, and guiding people with skill and integrity. When the room finally emptied, the SEAL Admiral stayed behind for a moment, quietly acknowledging her presence. Without exaggeration or ceremony, he expressed his admiration for her strategic insight, leadership, and composure. He understood that his initial jest had underestimated her, but more importantly, he recognized that she had already proven herself to be a remarkable officer whose influence and guidance would be invaluable in the critical mission ahead. The young officer left the room with quiet confidence, fully aware that she had made a lasting impression. The SEALs and officers would remember this day, not just for the details of the mission, but for the demonstration of leadership, courage, and mastery that she had shown. She had set a precedent for respect and authority, reminding everyone present that true leadership is earned through action, knowledge, and composure, rather than assumptions or appearances. In the end, the story of this briefing became more than just a demonstration of rank. It became a lesson in humility, respect, and the power of skill and experience. The SEAL Admiral's jest had unwittingly highlighted her extraordinary capability, and the silence that followed her declaration of rank had been transformed into recognition of her mastery. She had proven once and for all that leadership is defined not by perception, but by the ability to guide, inspire, and execute with precision, intelligence, and calm authority.